I'm Eric Barden.
I'm Amy Barden.
And this is Bombardened. Today we are going to talk with a good friend of ours, Dave Durocher. He's the executive director and co-founder of the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake City. Amy, what do they do?
Well, let's start with why I met him. So I was talking to our friend Robert, you'll recall, thinking about corrections, prisons, and jails in this country and how they look designed to fail people, in my opinion. And I asked Robert one day, what works? Do we have any design? I really like to focus people on what works, not just the deficiencies in the current system. And he said, you got to talk to this guy, Dave. Have you heard of him? And started to describe this, ex-convict, somebody with this long criminal history, who then set up basically a prison alternative community, first in Salt Lake City, and then there's actually a campus in Denver as well. And so I called Dave, and he, over the phone, blew my hair back. I could not believe how...
Blew mine clean off.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You had hair before that conversation. Yeah, and so right away, after about 30 minutes of talking with him, I said, can I come see? And then you and I got to actually go out and stay in this community. And actually, I will share with folks, what was so funny was Eric suddenly realizing the average person in this community has been arrested, more than
27 times.
Yeah, more than 25 times. And there's no locks. There's no locks anywhere. So we're shown to our little suite, which was lovely, very clean. And I didn't know if Eric was going to start moving furniture in front of the door. Yeah.
Well, so we stayed in the facility with 175 other folks, students in the program, and it's a residential program that is mostly ex-cons, mostly folks going to the Other Side Academy in lieu of jail or prison. Some folks off of the street, but nonetheless, all folks with severe addiction issues and severe criminal histories. So when I had my beautiful wife staying there, I was a little nervous when the doors didn't have locks.
I felt totally safe, like I always do.
Yeah. But what we found was a really phenomenal group of people at various stages of progression through the program. And what happens is it's a 2.5-year program, and they come in and there's fierce accountability. There's extraordinary structure. There's very high expectations for the students and participants. And then there's really honest feedback and feedback so much that it can be brutal, it can be rough, it can be hard, but they believe that that's how they change their wiring in the brain and how folks begin to think as a good person and to make the right decisions as opposed to giving themselves excuses to make poor decisions.
Right. Dave described to me, we set up a community in a community. We are teaching people, how do you interact with your neighbors, right? How do you hold down a job? How do you interact with one another? What is a healthy relationship? So I think that piece is always missing, that corrections, it isn't anything like the rest of society. That's what people tell me. It's a totally different culture. And then we exit you back to the opposite, right? A different kind of community, and expect you to know how to navigate it.
And the Other Side Academy actually immerses people in real life as if they were working full time and holding down a job and being responsible and taking care of their rent, right, and managing their daily life with integrity. So that when they exit the program, they can thrive, and they are so successfthey at it that there's a slew of companies that only hire graduates of the Other Side Academy. That they don't hire people off the street. They only hire they only hire addicts and convicts that have been through the Other Side Academy program. That tells you the success of that. Operation.
Yeah. The other funny moment for me when we went to visit, you remember we land at, we're exiting the airport, and I've mapped to the Other Side Academy, to Tosa. And I know Salt Lake pretty well. And I said, this cannot be right. It can't be right. Because it was right next to the governor's mansion. I knew the neighborhood. And so I remember going to the website thinking, is this possibly the right address? Because I expected it to be somewhere, far outside the city, corrections, fences, things like that. Nope. It's this, the campus is this block in one of the nicest parts of the city.
Yeah. So Dave's going to talk to us about his program, what works, what doesn't. And what I'm hopeful that we learn from this is, how do we design programs moving forward in all communities across the country? Because we know that folks are going to get out of jail. Folks are going to get out of prison. And they're going to be neighbors. They're going to be walking amongst us. They're going to be shopping at the store next to us. So we want the highest quality folks to exit these programs as possible, and without recidivism, without going back to jail, without using drugs, without being engaged in an unhealthy lifestyle. And Dave's program works. The Other Side Academy is producing those people, and our prisons and jails are not. So we need to stop doing what doesn't work, and we need to start doing what does. All right, well, welcome to another podcast of Bombardened. Welcome, Dave. Really excited to chat with you today about your history, where you've come from, but more importantly, where you are now and that phenomenal work that you're doing. For those watching, Amy and I had the great pleasure to go to the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake, spend time with Dave, stay at the Other Side Academy, meet a number of the students there, both in the housing setting as well as in their work settings. And it's just impactful. It's meaningful. Real change is occurring. Dave is impacting the lives of hundreds of folks and the future neighbors and friends and family members of these folks that are going through the program. So welcome, Dave. Thanks for being here.
Before we get into any of that, Dave, I want you to settle a fight we had the other night, okay? So this is real. This was a pretty heated debate. So I was talking about the correction system in this country. And I said, the origin of corrections in this country is punishment. It's all premised. It's anchored in an idea that you did a bad thing and we will punish you for it. And it was my contention, correctly, that it really hasn't changed, right? That if you look at the way prisons and jails are operating, there's a few exceptions, but on the whole, it looks like they're still designed to punish, to compound trauma. And now tell us your wrong take. Go ahead.
My wrong take. Well, so I like how you've now changed sort of the premise of your position, because it strengthens it. But my take is that, they called it corrections for a reason, because the folks believed, and I admit wrongly, that being incarcerated is a deterrent, and therefore folks would by that very nature correct their behavior. And then while they're, because they've had classes and they've had school and learning capabilities that people well-intentioned thought was providing an opportunity for corrections. I said, that's why they call it corrections. Now, I grant you ineffective, considerably ineffective when compared to what Dave is doing at the Other Side Academy. So, Dave, I think we're both right. But anyway.
Well, let me give you a little take on that.
Please do.
You're both making very salient points. But here's the thing. When it comes to education in prisons, and this is why for a long time we've failed miserably. A lot of people think that the minute you go to prison, you need to get a formal education, need to get your GED, need to do this, need to do that. It's such a crock. When I was in Delancey Street in Los Angeles, 275 residents living there, 95% of them did not have their education at all. So we helped them get their GED. Here in Utah, the vast majority of people who come to us have their GED. Guess where they got it?
Prison.
What word should I use?
You can say shit.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? So now you're in jail. You're a liar. You're a cheater. You're a thief. You're a manipulator. You're self-centered. You're self-seeking. You're violent. That's why you're in prison. And now you have an education. You know that 2 + 2 is 4, 4 + 4 is 8. Grant's buried in his tomb, and the War of 1812 was fought in 1812. Who cares? If you don't change the cognitive way you view the world and how you respond to the world, that education goes out the window. 95% of my students have their education and they got it in jail and prison and went right back to the same behavior.
Yeah.
We're doing it backwards. What we should focus on in jail and focus on in prison is behavior modification, peer run, peer led TCs or therapeutic communities where the inmates are calling each other on their behaviors, holding each other accountable, making sure there's consequences for good behavior and bad behavior, and give us the opportunity to recalibrate our moral compass, then educate.
Yeah. Will you just run through your life real quick? Because it was fascinating, actually, the first time we spoke.
27 years of hardcore drug addiction. When I say hardcore drug addiction, I don't mean I smoked a joint on Friday, drank a beer Saturday, went to work Monday. That's not it. Hardcore drug addict, intravenous drug addict for decades, out of the workforce for decades. And not because of drugs, but because of my behaviors, I started getting arrested, did a 2-year prison term, got out for 59 days, got busted again, did a 5-year prison term, got out for 60 days. So at least I'm staying out longer. Got busted again, got a 6-year prison term, got out for 4 months, got busted again, got a 10-year prison term. So it was a 2-year term, a 5-year term, a 6-year term, and a 10-year term. And I never went to jail or went to prison because I got high. I went to jail and I went to prison because I was committing crimes, because I was making the conscious decision to do what I knew was wrong. And prison was necessary for me. I am grateful for prison. And I think prisons are needed in our community. But then, when I got out of my 10-year prison sentence, it's safe to say after every term, the day I got out, I was on my way back in. Yeah. But I got into a lot of trouble that included a helicopter, included a high-speed chase where I had wanton disregard for public safety. I was trying to outrun the cops to get to a bridge to throw all the drugs and weapons out the window into the water, and I never made it there. I crashed through I want to say quasi roadblock where the cops had parked in the intersection blocking the traffic because they knew I was headed to that intersection. I pushed the cop cars out of the way. They did the pit maneuver, spun me out of control, pulled me out of that car at gunpoint, and commenced to give me one of the worst beatings I've ever taken in my life. And I had every bit of it coming. Every last bit, handcuffs or otherwise. I risked everybody's life during that 15 or 20-minute chase. Went to jail, was looking at, basically 29 years. Over a year of fighting my case, some of the ancillary charges had fallen off. Got it down to 22 years. And then Judge Pacheco was resolute. His name was Richard Pacheco, that I was going back to prison for 22 years, whether I pled out or whether I went to trial. Then I wrote a place called Delancey Street. It was widely known as the gold standard as far as therapeutic communities. No judge in their right mind is going to send me to a 30, 60, or a 90-day model. And if you think that it was going to help me, you need more help than I did. And we'll get to that here shortly. That model is broken, severely broken. But Delancey Street is 2 years long. And I wrote, and they accepted me, and the judge said no. So I eventually wrote that judge a letter. I'm looking for a legal pad. I had one in here on a yellow pad of paper, a lot like this one, front and back, 4 pages long. And I told that judge my life story. And I said, Your Honor, I've been to prison 4 times already. It didn't work. Not that it was intended to. And it's not your fault. That's mine. Now I'm looking at 22 years, right? You made that very clear. But Delancey Street thinks they can help me. It's the only place that really is built for people like I had become at that time. Please, Your Honor, let me go to Delancey Street. What do you got to lose? If I get kicked out or I split, you can lock me up for the rest of my life. Or the next time you see me, it's because I'm coming back to say thank you. And then I did something that a lot of people said I shouldn't do. I pled guilty. I told them I was guilty of sales, transportation, weapons, high-speed chase, everything. I go, Your Honor, you've got me. And I'm taking a chance right now. I really am just pleading with you to give me a chance to suspend this time over my head. Let me go to Delancey Street, see if it changes my life. And I went to court about 6 weeks later. And I'll never forget that moment. I'm in a tiny metal cage, right? California, that's what it's like there for guys like me. Ankle irons, waist irons, handcuffs. And Judge Pacheco said, Mr. Durocher, against my better judgment, I'm going to give you the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm going to let you go to Delancey Street. You're going to plead guilty to all of your charges in this courtroom. You're going to sign a deal for 22 years. When you get kicked out or when you split, I've got you for the rest of your life. plead, sign your deal, and get out of my courtroom. And I will never forget it. There was other things that he articulated in there, but basically saying he's giving me the chance of a lifetime, but he doesn't think I'm going to make it. But he gave me the shot. And I ended up staying in Delancey Street, not just the 2 years, but for 8.5 years.
So tell us for those that don't know what Delancey Street is, tell us what that program is and how it relates to your program now.
Delancey Street is a 2-year re-education facility for the most lost among us. 5 of them in the country. San Francisco is headquarters. Los Angeles is site 2, second largest facility. Then New Mexico, North Carolina, New York. It opened in 1971, started by ex-convicts. Then Mimi Silbert got brought on board, and she took it from its infant stages into what it is today. It was widely known in this country for decades as the premier re-education facility or life skills vocational training school for people like us in this country for a long time. I say somewhat affectionately until we started the Other Side Academy here in Utah. And I'll tell you, Delancey Street saved my life. But the beauty of Delancey Street was it was long, it was free, it was extremely hard. And the difference between Delancey Street and TOSA and most other models is we tell you the damn truth. We don't sugarcoat anything. We don't blame it on a disease. We don't blame it on anything. My behaviors landed me in jail and prison. I knew the difference between right and wrong, and I did it anyway. And if it wasn't for Delancey Street, I should still be in prison today, 20 years into that 22-year sentence. But Delancey Street worked its magic. The peers there got their talons in me and tore me apart and addressed the issues of my behaviors, what a liar, what a thief, what a cheat, what a drug dealer, gun running, parasite on the community that I had become. And for some reason, we're so afraid now in this country to tell people the truth. Oh my gosh, you can't say that. It's shaming. If you lived the way I did, shouldn't you be shamed? If you knew what I was doing on the street, and people don't get up in the morning in Delancey Street and go, okay, how can we shame somebody? But they tell us the truth. And if you have a conscience, you'll feel a little shame. Shame is healthy. But man, do we live in a world now that says, oh gosh, you can't say that. It's not their fault. Their daddy was mean to them, or this happened or that happened. We didn't do that in Delancey Street. And that's the difference. Delancey Street held me accountable to who I was the day I got there and showed me a path forward to become the new version of myself.
And why doesn't when we send folks to therapists and counselors for an hour or two here and there, how come that program fails where your program succeeds?
Okay, now can I be blunt in this?
Please, we like blunt.
Amy, I'm going to use you in this. I'm answering a question right now.
Yes.
You're my therapist. You and I have never met. You're an academic. You went to school.
I am Dr. Barden, actually. You know that.
You're Dr. Barden.
I'm Dr. Barden.
So you think you understand Dave Durocher.
Yes, I've read books about you.
I've been a long-term, exactly. I've been a long-term dope fiend, ripping and running on the streets, running meth by the pounds, selling guns, doing violent stuff, living on the streets, living in jails, and living in prisons in California, right? Which I refer to as high school with knives. I'm sorry, Amy, there isn't a class available to teach you about who I am. But our first therapy session, Dr. Barton.
Yes.
We're going to sit down. You're going to ask me a battery of questions. I'm going to blow some sunshine up your dress. I'm going to tell you a bunch of lies. And at the end of that session, you're going to diagnose me based on the lies I'm telling you. You have no idea if what I'm telling you is true or not. And then at the end of that session, you're going to diagnose me and you're going to prescribe me some medication to make me feel better. Welcome to treatment today.
Yeah.
And what's really going to happen is in about 7 or 8 more sessions, I'm going to get in there and we're probably going to take off together because I've done that too.
Oh, God.
And welcome to treatment facilities where half the time the resident there is going to end up sleeping with the therapist. It's fascinating how often that happens in this country. Treatment facility after treatment facility after treatment facility. It is just horrific what goes on.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line is you're a therapist. I'm a liar. You have to figure out what's wrong with me based on the lies I'm telling you. That's what's wrong with the system.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do see across the areas that we talk about, homelessness, folks who are reentering after incarceration, people who are addicted, it is always that credibility of the messenger. The people that I observe who get to yes, or I was you. Yes. I know, or I know that you're bullshitting me right now. I used to say the same thing. And so I think that's really interesting. We're getting more sophisticated understanding, that peer credibility. But I do think we went a little sideways, assuming if somebody has lived the experience, that they know actually how to speak to somebody who's currently in it. And I've heard Eric say before, we shouldn't be relying on folks who haven't broken the cycle for themselves to be informing our practice. You know what I mean?
Well, one of the things that we heard when we were at your facility and when we were sitting down to groups is we heard people offering perspectives and excuses for why they were doing whatever it is that they were being called upon to discuss, and their answers were manipulative and rationality and this and that. And one of the other members of the group said, "Look, remember who you're talking to. I said that stuff. I used to say that. So that doesn't work with me." That's why it was so impactful, because folks are being held to account by their peers who have walked those footsteps before them. It's very compelling.
Yeah. Well, which do you think is going to be more effective? One-on-one therapy with somebody with no lived experience, or living in a facility with 150 other people exactly like you, and your behaviors are going to be addressed based on real behaviors, not just a conversation. And your peers are going to call you on that. Which one do you think is really more effective?
Right.
By far, this is more effective. No doctors, no counselors, no therapists to muddle the program.
So, people don't tell folks what the Other Side Academy is. Tell folks when folks go there, it's not a once a week deal. It's they live there, they work there, they learn there. Tell us about that.
The Other Side Academy is a 30-month-long residential life skills and vocational training school for the most lost among us. Our average student's been arrested 25.6 times. I've got a handful of people that have been arrested over 50 times and 2 or 3 that have never been arrested, but the aggregate total. So it's the long-term drug addict coupled with the criminal piece. The vast majority of the students here have already been to countless treatment facilities to no avail, because they're not addressing the real issue. The treatment facilities want to talk about drugs, the physiological implications on the pituitary gland, trauma. Not that that doesn't need to be talked about, but if you don't focus on the behaviors and give people an opportunity to practice those behaviors every day and get called on them, you're not going to change the behaviors. And even if you get somebody to treatment facility clean and sober for 30 days, who gives a shit if they haven't changed the way they think? They're going to go back out there to the same thing. So the Other Side Academy is long, it is structured, it is hard, it is real, it is honest. We're going to tell you the truth and hold you accountable. And that's why we've been open now for 10 years with no dirty drug test to adult parole and probation, no violence, no acts of violence, because we don't make excuses for people. We simply do not make excuses, because all of us drug addicts know I can continue to use, I can ask for help, and drugs aren't the problem. Behaviors are. And we're not focused enough on that. And that's why we're not solving the problem. So here's a question. As it relates to drug addiction, is the problem in all of our communities, including Seattle, getting better or worse as it relates to drug addiction, homelessness, and crime?
Worse.
Better or worse?
Much worse.
Then when are we gonna back up and assess what we're doing and be honest with ourselves and say what we're doing is not working? And I'll give you an example. We do interviews in jails of people who write us all the time. They're writing from the county jail. They want to come to the Other Side Academy. And we go in and we do the interview. And in the interview, we'll ask them if they're on medications. And they go, yeah, we're on this medication, this medication, this medication. Well, what were you diagnosed with? Anxiety and depression. Well, when I'm running from the cops, what am I suffering from?
Probably a little anxiety.
And when I get busted and I'm in jail, what am I suffering from?
A little depression.
Here, take these, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the world we live in.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. And let me make this clear. Medications play an important role for some, but not the masses. Yeah. Let me ask you this question. I'm going to tell you right now that we need to believe in people who are seeking the truth, and we need to question those who say they found it. The Sacketts that developed the opioids, right? When did the FDA approve that?
I actually don't know.
1987, the FDA approved what do you call
Was
it?
it Oxy? Yeah.
Oxycontin was the big thing. 20s, 40s, and 60s, or maybe it was 40s, 60s, and 80s. Doctors were prescribing it in bottles of 1,000. What was everybody being told about it?
But it wasn't addictive.
Question what we think we know.
Yeah.
We killed America. We started the opioid epidemic and went through the FDA. Doctors and academics all said, here, it's perfectly safe. Got America hooked on it. That really is when the opioid, when it all started.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at MAT and we're looking at all these psych meds. So let's digress. I'm in jail interviewing somebody. Anxiety and depression. And I tell them, well, we're not going to accept you at the Other Side Academy if you're on any kind of medications. They go back to the therapist in the jail and they get a clean bill of health. 30 days ago, the doctor put you on this medication and diagnosed you with something. 30 days later, you get a clean bill of health saying you don't need it. That's because when we went to the doctor, we knew what to say to get on it. And when we went back to the doctor, we knew what to say to get off it. They don't know.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is why do Americans consume like 40% of the global illicit drug supply? Because that's not just Westerners, that's Americans specifically. And we're, 4% of the global population. And so sometimes I ask medical doctors about that, like, what is going on here? And often people say, we do default to a drug will help. Whatever you're feeling, whatever the human experience you are having, there is a drug for that. And one of our friends in recovery said, do you understand the irony of me trying to get off pills? And so I'm given different pills. And so when you think about even patterning behavior, you're actually maintaining the same behavior. So it was so fascinating for me to come to actually stay at the Other Side Academy, because I had learned from folks who have been in our prisons here that the way it's been described is that you're conditioned to do the opposite of what works in the world. And I don't know anything about that. So I remember the first time I heard it, I said, like, what? And he said, Amy, eye contact, asking for help, asking questions when you don't know. And he went through like what will happen in that culture if you do these sort of normal pro-social behaviors that work in the workplace and work in families. And so what would you say about that?
Well, I'm going to tell you, the reason why we're doing it in this country is because we allow it. I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to tell you right now. If you normalize drug use will become normal. Let's say after, I'm going to assume neither one of you are drug addicts. Probably a pretty fair assumption, right? After this podcast, because Dave can be so darn intense, right? You're like, holy cow. And you guys go home and you decide to smoke a joint for the first time. Never done it before. At your young ages of 40 each, first time you've ever smoked a joint, right? You have the intellectual capacity to understand the choice you're making and the emotional maturity to understand the choice you're making. But now your 16-year-old's coming home from school and he walks in the house. What does he smell?
Pot.
Yeah.
Who's he stealing it from 6 months from now?
Yeah.
Mom and dad.
He's stealing it from mom and dad, but he's hanging out with other kids. And the 16-year-old doesn't have the intellectual capacity or the emotional maturity to understand the decision they're making. So 6 months after he starts smoking pot, now he does his first line of meth. We're legalizing drugs in this country. We're legalizing pot all over the place. Yeah. Look at all the cities. Look at Portland. Look at Colorado. They're not better off for this. There's so much damn money in it that we want to be able to tax it. We are creating drug addicts in this country and then pretending like we give a shit about what we're doing. It's our own fault. It doesn't, look at all the real studies when it comes to people smoking pot. Yeah. They're lethargic. They've got other issues going on. They don't want to work. There's so much money in it. We've sold out for the money. Look at these cities. Look at Seattle. Look at Portland. Look at San Francisco. Look at Los Angeles. Look at Kensington, Pennsylvania. I think I shared this with you guys when you were here. It's an open air drug market. You walk outside these apartments. It's in a community in the United States of America. And you have people leaned over with needles in their arm on the sidewalks in a community, and they're allowing them to do it. That's why. If you normalize drug use will become normal.
Will you speak to the financial model you've got at TOSA? Because I found that fascinating, because I know something about what we spend on corrections.
Yeah. The Other Side Academy, if you get interviewed and you get accepted, is completely free. We don't take any money from the government at all. The city, the county, the state, the federal government, nothing from rich mommy and daddy, and nothing from insurance. And the reason for that is this. If you're going to send me to a treatment facility, what's the first question the treatment facility asks me? How much money do you have? How are you paying? I don't have any. Go die. Now, they don't say go die, but you can't stay.
Yeah.
If I do have money, it's because you two, my mom and dad, are going to fork up $25,000. When do I have to leave?
When we run out of money.
The system is broken. The model is broken. Can you imagine 27 years of hardcore drug addiction with the life I explained earlier, going to a 30-day model?
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks I'm going to get well there needs more help than I do. Nobody is ready on day 30, day 60, or day 90. Delancey Street was 2 years long. That's 730 days. Nobody was ready on day 730. That's the earliest you could leave. We are 2.5 years long, but you can stay longer and we're free. We keep the government as far away from this as we possibly can. If the government knew how to solve this problem, they wouldn't have created it.
Yeah. Talk about the businesses.
Now, I'm not saying people are sitting behind a curtain going, how can we? But, there's so much incentive to not solve the problem that we can't be the only ones that understand the dosage effect. The longer you're in treatment, the better your odds of success. And all this happened with the government. Roughly 60 years ago, when treatment facilities popped up, they were 28 days long. The average American had 2 weeks of vacation and 2 weeks of sick pay. So Eric could take 4 weeks off work, go to the treatment facility for his alcoholism, go back to work, and nobody knew. Then Phoenix House, Daytop, Synanon, some of these 2-year programs popped up, doing incredible work with great success. And the government noticed. And the government came in and said, Phoenix House, holy cow, you guys are saving a lot. You're doing great work. Populate the country. Here's $40 million. Open up a bunch more. But can you do it in 1 year rather than 2? Then they came back and said, here's some more money. Open up some more. But can you do it in 6 months? You can serve more people. Who cares how many people you serve if you're ineffective? Right. The government did this.
Right. It was interesting when we spoke about that. I realized I grew up fully believing it takes 28 days to change a habit. I believe that. I'm sure I've said that in adulthood. Even past the point of being educated, I know better. That's completely arbitrary. So I want you to talk about the social enterprise model because I think the role of workforce development, but just the dignity that comes with work. My dad always said it's a spiritual necessity. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Yeah. So speak to that.
So because we don't take any money from the government, right, and we're a nonprofit, people will go, well, then how do you do it? We have our own social enterprises. Now, can I get up and walk over and show the can I do this?
Yeah.
Please.
So this is our org chart. All the different colors indicate different levels in the program, right? This here is our moving company. It is the #1 rated moving company in the entire state of Utah. We do about 300 moves a month. In 2018, we were at the Grand America Hotel and we won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneurs of the Year with a moving company ran by ex-felons and ex-drug addicts. Could you imagine how they felt when they won that award? We have 2 large thrift boutiques. We have a storage and a construction company. Those social enterprises generate all of our revenue so that the day you get here, you become part of the solution, not part of the problem. And I'll share with you why that's important. When I was going to jail, who was paying for me?
The state.
Yeah.
The taxpayer was. You were. I was exploiting you.
Yeah.
When I was going to prison, who was paying for me?
Taxpayer.
You were the taxpayer.
Yep.
The day you get here, the social enterprises generate the revenue. You're expected to get up every day and go to work. And if you want to help us learn to live in a healthy community, replicate a healthy community. Instead, what we do in treatment is once every couple days, me and Amy are going to sit down and I'm going to lie to her about how I'm feeling and what I'm going through. 30 days later, I graduate. I'm going to be walking down the street with my pants sagging, my hat on crooked with a criminal record, and I've only been clean for 30 days and I got to go find a job. I have no idea how to work.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is get up in the morning, be on time, go to work, go to break on time, come back on time, go to lunch, come back on time, afternoon break, punch out at 5, not 4:59. Follow simple instructions, have a good attitude, go to bed, rinse and repeat. Drug addicts do not know how to do that. So you stay here for a few years, you work on those social enterprises, and after 2 or 3 years, guess what you've learned how to do?
All of those things.
Work.
Yeah.
So we do something that nobody else in the entire world does. This in the entire world. That block right there is a small portion of the companies that hire our graduates on day one. The day they graduate, you've got a job anywhere from $20 to $35 an hour. Every single graduate has a job. We place them in the job. You find me a treatment facility anywhere in the world that places their graduates in jobs, they can't. Because if they started to do that 1 year later, all those employers are going to stop hiring them because they're failing at 95% of the time because they're not in the facility long enough and they haven't learned to work.
Yeah.
So when I go to jails and prisons all over the country, I do presentations for the inmates. Sometimes I've got 50, sometimes I've got 500. I'll ask the whole group, who in here knows how to work? And all their hands go up. And I tell them they're all liars. If you knew how to work, that's where you'd be. Where are you today? In jail, in prison. Well, how many times have you been in prison? 4. How many times have you been arrested? 36. That's what you know how to do. If you knew how to work, that's where you'd be. That work piece is critical.
So think about this. This is I love the fact that your one of your primary enterprises is a moving company, because the irony of that is just so fantastic. I love it. So let's see, if I'm going to move and I'm looking for a moving company, am I going to pick the moving company that is employs only criminals? Or am I going to use a moving company that doesn't, right? And so the fact that you've overcome that, not only to be a successful moving company, but the highest rated moving company in the state of Utah, not a township.
We read the reviews.
And nearly 5-star reviews across the board. I mean, it's
thousands.
It's absolutely amazing. And so do you think, why is that? How were you able to do that? Why? How do your students conduct themselves out in the field that then generates that kind of review and feedback?
Well, and trust.
We have extremely high expectations. And when I started the moving company nearly 10 years ago, I was the one going out on the moves, taking some of the students with me. It took years for them to grow up to get old enough to do it on their own. Now, then, of course, they will have been here for a long time and they've earned the right and the trust. But let me digress to what you said about hiring a moving company. Nobody listening to this has ever met a mover that graduated from high school and shook Eric's hand while you're going to go off to college. I'm going to go be a mover. Nobody wants to be a mover. If you have a pulse, a moving company will hire you. Nobody wants to be a mover. And most of your movers are going to have a beer inside their cooler in the truck and probably something illegal in their pocket and probably on their cell phone the whole time while you're charging them $75 an hour to the client. None of that goes on here. We've taken all that out of the equation. The moving company is so darn important. People thought we were crazy when we started a social enterprise with this population moving. But if you didn't hire us, you'd be hiring people that are us before they got the help.
Right.
That's who's on moving. Let's be real about who's on moving.
I don't know.
Companies.
I've only moved
That's
myself.
true. That's fair. That's fair.
Nobody on a moving company doesn't have a criminal record and do drugs.
Right.
Nobody in their right mind wants to move. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
We hold people on the moving company accountable the same way we hold them accountable here in the house. The reason why we've been open for 10 years with no dirty drug test to adult parole and probation, because we call out every little tiny thing you do. Everything. We hold you accountable to your attitude, your work ethic, your behavior, everything. We call it out. And that translates. Now, when you come here, whether you're in food service, whether you're at the thrift boutique, whether you're in construction, whether you're on the moving company, we're going to ask the very most from you and give you the opportunity to practice until you recalibrate your moral compass. Yeah. That work piece is so important.
So one of the things that we've heard you say, and we've heard some others say, is that you have to act like a good person would act to become a good person. You just don't flip a switch and become a good person. So tell us about that philosophy. How does that work?
It's act as if. When you get here and you come off the street or you come out of jail and prison, you're not a nice guy, right? Maybe you have the potential to be, but you don't know how to be. So we act as if you're nice until you become. Act as if you're a hard worker until you learn to do it. Act as if you're good until you become good. Act as if until you become. Look, it's this simple. If you want to get good at something, what do?
Practice.
You want to get really good at it, what do?
Practice a lot.
You want to get great at it, what do?
Keep practicing.
When you take broken people like I once was and you put me in Delancey Street and for 8 straight years I practiced being a good person every day, you can't help but succeed. But you can't do that in 30, 60, or 90 days. And that's the model we've been using. And if you want to help us, I said this earlier, don't set me in a classroom with some teacher in a didactic learning system. Give us the opportunity to practice real life with real pressures, with real feedback from real people that understand, and see what happens then.
What happens if that feedback is, what if it hurts their feelings?
Tough shit. Grow up.
I kind of knew that was going to be your answer.
I mean, think about it. That's such a great question, Eric. Thank you. Because what if the feedback hurts your feelings? Then it's true. If the feedback hurts your feelings, it's because we've hit a chord and we said something that's true. We're so deathly afraid. I mean, you could go to a treatment facility today. I think I gave you guys this analogy. And Eric, you could pick my phone up and steal it. And I could catch you at the door and snatch my phone back. But I'm not allowed to call you a thief because it's shaming. You just stole my phone. What are you? When we live in this woke world where it's like, oh gosh, you can't say that to the poor drug addict. It's not their fault. Oh my goodness. Listen, when the drug addict criminal becomes the protected class, we're going to lose our communities as we know it. If you want to help people, you tell them the truth.
Right.
If you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah, one of the pieces that you illuminated so well for me was this reality that folks who are, again, years, decades into these behaviors, they don't know how to have good relationships across the board. Because I was asking, like, you have a female campus, a male campus, and, you know, we're talking about that, the austerity, that there are no relationships. Then explain, there is no way to have a healthy relationship. You do not know how. You know how to manipulate, you know how to lie. So I want you to describe the group that we went to for the folks watching this. And what was so interesting is we were watching people navigate conflict, right? Challenge one another. I was watching them really work to focus on the behavior and not attack the person, which the most sophisticated among us, most do not know how to do that, actually. But what we kept hearing again and again is, you're better than this. You're better than this. You were doing so well. Don't do this. Don't backslide. And I think what that is love. That's actual love. That's actual concern. I love you enough to call this out and to hold you accountable.
Love is truth.
Yeah.
If somebody in your life that you truly care about is doing something that is detrimental to their safety and their health, do you say something to them?
Yeah.
Why do we not want to do that with drug addicts? I'm telling you, sometimes I think that the powers that be don't want to solve this problem. If you want to help us, tell us the truth and hold us accountable to the choices that we're making. Drug addiction is a choice. It is a choice. I've been clean for 20 years. If I decide to use today, it's not because my disease kicked in. It's because I thought it through. I was calculating. I had to figure out where I was going to get it. I knew I was going to break some people's hearts, and I did it anyway. That's not a disease. That's a bad choice. Hold me accountable to the choices I'm making. Stop making excuses for drug addicts and turning it into something that it isn't. It is a choice. And whether it's a disease or whether it isn't is really irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, how do you get out of it?
Well, I worry about the message, too, to people that this is the best we can hope for you. You know, Suboxone for life. This is the best that we can hope for you. And I just categorically reject that. I think that everybody can always be better off.
Just remember what happened in 1987. They said it was non-addictive. Big Pharma is pushing this down the pipeline and they're shoving it down people's throats. Here's how this should work. If I'm on the street, especially today with the way the market's changed and fentanyl is killing people, I'm smoking 10 pills a day. The only way I'm going to quit is I'm going to get arrested and go to jail, or I'm going to choose to, or I'm going to die. I guess there's 3, right? Let's say today I decide I want to quit. It's so painful quitting opiates that nobody usually quits on their own. It's just too painful. You'd rather die. But if I raise my hand and say, I want help, and I go to a detox, MAT is great to wean you off of that stuff. But damn it, 3 weeks later, be done with that too. Now I see people that have been on methadone and they're destroyed.
Yeah.
And all these other medications for years on end, they're never really abstinent. Abstinent is the best answer. And I have 175 people living here, all former hardcore dope fiends that will tell you the same thing. But go to a treatment facility where everybody's on MAT and they're going to tell you that I need Suboxone. No, you don't need Suboxone. You're allowed to take it.
Yeah, I've learned here in Washington State, people can be sober for years sometimes. And when they exit back to community, they're offered Suboxone just in case. I could not believe that.
Yeah, even from sobriety, offered Suboxone or Sublocade to go out into the community. I mean, to your point about like we're fixing a pharmacological problem with pharmacologically. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all, right?
So will you describe the philosophy behind these groups that we saw? I think it's twice a week, right? Because that I haven't seen anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Those are we call them breakthrough groups. Peer-to-peer feedback. It is so critical. It's where the magic happens. You're sitting in a room, the two of you are in there with 25 other people, and Eric's getting blasted for stealing the Twinkies and putting them behind the toaster, and he's been with us for 6 months, right? That's stealing, and he doesn't have drugs to blame it on. You passed a note to a guy, Amy, right, that said, I really care about you. And that guy has a 10-year prison sentence suspended over his head. But you said, dear Jimmy, I really care about you. If you gave a shit about him, you never would have passed that note. You don't care about anybody but yourself. So the people in the group are going to call you guys on those behaviors. We're not going to pat you on the back, give you a fuzzy little pair of slippers and a robe and tell you everything's going to be okay because we want you to stay here because we need the Medicaid money. We're going to tell you the truth about those decisions that you made. And Eric, how dare you? 6 months in the program, you're going to steal Twinkies? You thief? Amy, this guy's got 10 years over his head. 10 years. Yeah. You pass him a note, you guys sneak off for 30 seconds of pleasure and he goes back to prison. You've got blood on your hands. If you cared about him, you'd have left him alone. You're selfish. You don't care about anybody but yourself. So what did we say that wasn't true? But nowhere else will they do that. Right. Everywhere else, you're going to have a therapist sit down in a white lab coat. Eric, you must have been hungry. I'm so sorry you were hungry. And Amy, you must really think Jimmy's cute. Now, you know we don't pass notes to boys here, right? And you're going to laugh like you are right now. But when your peers blast you in that room for your behaviors and you take that to your pillow, it starts to sink in that I am still sneaky. I am a thief. I am a liar. And if we don't fix those behaviors, 100% of the time, you'll go back to drugs. We're so damn concerned about trying to solve the drug problem that we're ignoring the behavior problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the choreography of that group was fascinating to me because they don't know who we are, right? And Eric and I are just sitting there. I think people were concerned about probably my apparent fragility. But it was so interesting because immediately...
It was Eric's, actually.
Yeah, it was mine.
Yeah, immediately I'm looking around for like, who's running this, right? Where is the therapist? Or I mean, I was. And then a guy starts talking and it did become apparent who was brand new and who had been there and was a little bit more experienced. But it was fascinating to watch people. I think self-awareness is the hardest thing. I mean, that's why family's so powerful when it goes well, right? Yep. You know, I have 4 grown kids and there's a lot of honest feedback there, you know, and as they got older, they started giving me the best feedback of my life that I had no awareness of a lot of my own patterns. And I'm somebody who's supposed to know about this. And so it was really cool to see what I would consider breakthrough moments. Like, oh, maybe I was motivated by this. You know, I'm telling myself a story because that's what we do. We all tell ourselves stories about why it's okay to do what we're doing. But the humility to actually take a step back and go, oh, maybe I am self-interested here, right? Yeah. Or jealous or frustrated. Yeah. And
Yeah, for me, the thing that was just, I mean, I've been in a lot of fancy places, you know, boardrooms and executive leadership boards and the executive leadership of a major city police department. And I saw more integrity in your group session than I've seen in a lot of those meetings from folks that have had a very, very rough life and have done a lot of bad things. So the accountability piece, and you know, I was joking earlier about the feelings component, but I think we've, to your point, become so concerned about the feelings of the person who needs to change that we have watered down and in some cases completely eliminated the accountability component of this thing. And I've heard this from a number of different folks recently is like accountability is compassion. That is showing love. That is showing care. Because if I let you continue to do bad things, I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
But if I call you on it, hold you accountable to that, and I know that you have a disincentive program, for folks that violate rules and this and that. So there is a consequence to that. And so folks then do learn. So I think that accountability piece is so critical.
Well, and I feel like too, when people know the worst of us, right? Brutal honesty, and then we're still loved and valued, and you're not kicked out of this community. That's when we start to change. And I think most Americans walk around with that fear. I know kids do. If she really knew me, what I was thinking or what I've done, then I would be rejected. And so it creates this distance, this isolation, and then back to the fentanyl epidemic. I think that's a lot of it, is that the way that we self-isolate.
I agree. Here's something to just take with you, right? And if you take nothing else from this, take this. Every organization on the planet, police departments, hospitals, grocery stores, treatment facilities, every single organization with a pulse is beholden to one of two things, either power or truth. And when organizations become beholden to power, they will be sick, sometimes sick beyond help. When they're beholden to truth, they will be healthy. When you think about police departments, right? And you guys know how I feel about law enforcement. I was just with the FOP, right? With police, I'm on the board with the South Salt Lake Police Department. I love law enforcement. But the military and law enforcement are two of the only organizations that are really struggle to have some street cop tell the captain what he's doing wrong, right? It's really difficult to do because that's the culture that's been built. When you look at Tom Brady a number of years ago, AFC championship game, cold. He went in at halftime. It was called Deflategate. He asked the equipment manager to release some air out of the football. The equipment manager did it. Tom Brady was then suspended 4 games the next season. The equipment manager was beholden to power. Wells Fargo for years opening up fictitious accounts, bilking people out of millions of dollars. Nobody said anything. People were beholden to power. When organizations are beholden to power, they will get sick. Here at the Other Side Academy, from the executive director, myself, to our chairman of the board and our CEO, we have to go to those same groups with our students. When was the last time you could take your boss into a room and call your boss on the carpet in front of their peers and have a job the next day? I mean, call them on it.
Yeah, that's right.
Here, they can take me to a group and call me on it. There's no repercussions, nothing. We all hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
It's across the board, right? Love and truth. When organizations are beholden to power, they will get sick. When they're beholden to truth, they will be healthy. If you love people, you tell them the truth, period.
Yeah.
Anything shy of that is enabling.
It's interesting because there's a whole body of research behind what you're saying now. We know that. It's Amy Edmondson talks about psychological safety. I think I told you I studied learning organizations, right? And actually looked at the military specifically. That chain of command, while perhaps useful on the battlefield, is antithetical to a learning organization.
Yep.
We're smarter when there's candor. I mean, in my current job, I have to repeatedly convince people, debate with me, argue with me. This is subjective. I admire people with dissent opinions. And I have been in meetings too where I'm like, we're not leaving in agreement. It's more complicated than that. We should be able to debate this 6 different ways. But it's very rare that you see that in an organization, that you have leaders who actually believe that. Because it sucks to be challenged, right? And we all cringe to be wrong. But I do think that's true academics. You get sort of trained. You're supposed to dismantle my thinking. You're supposed to tell me what I don't understand. And so I do feel like that we have this horrific gap between, white papers, right? What academics think they understand, and then what's actually happening, what it actually feels like to be you. So I want to ask you, you've been doing this for 10 years, wild success, no adverse outcomes. How is this not the model? It's a better economic model. It's a more humane model. What's going on?
I'm going to tell you why. And I anytime I get this question, it's always hard for me to answer it because it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back. But you can't do it, and you can't do it, and there isn't an academic out there that can do it.
Right.
The reason why therapeutic communities are so successful is you have to find leaders who have been hardcore drug addicts, lived on the streets, been to jail, been to prison. So you have all that life experience. Went to a TC/therapeutic community, stayed for a long time, and understands the machinations of a TC, understands the 1,000 nuances with this population in order to manage this population and all the businesses, it's hard to find people that can do that. And what we're doing is we're going to the colleges and all the graduates. We're going, you guys, come on, you're going to run these treatment facilities. But they have no lived experience. We wonder why we're failing miserably. The best TCs in the world, Delancey Street, Habilitat in Hawaii, Trosa in North Carolina, the Other Side Academy, are ran by people with lived experience. We are immensely successful because it's not the medical model. Yeah. It's not the medical model. It's the behavior model. So you got to find people. Then, right, the people you find to run it have to be willing to live on property. I live on property. I'm here 24 hours a day, unless I'm out of town, right? Yeah. But I don't even have a day off. This is a mission. So you got to find people that have the aptitude for this work, the heart for this work, and the commitment for this work. Good luck. That really is the answer.
Yeah.
It's so hard to find the leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think while it's impossible without that to replicate the Other Side Academy and some of the other successful programs, certainly there's a number of philosophies and perspectives that we could incorporate into the other programs that exist. You know, the authenticity, the integrity, the willingness to hold folks accountable, the high expectation. I mean, the bias of low expectations is what we were talking about earlier when we were saying, you're a drug addict, so I understand. No, I don't understand. That's not okay. That's not acceptable behavior. Yeah. And it's not the drug's fault or anybody else's fault, but it's your own responsibility to change the behavior. I think we can incorporate a lot of those things into some of the existing programs until we can get, and I think in a perfect world, we would have synergy between the criminal justice system and Other Side Academies in every community. And then because some folks need that, maybe yourself included, at 22 years, you're staring at 22 years, or you go to Delancey Street. Of course, that was your own, at your own behest, but without that hanging over your head, sometimes folks aren't going to make those tough calls and put themselves through that.
Yeah. I'm here to tell you, I didn't have the gonads, for lack of a better phrase.
I think that's medical. I think you're fine.
Right. to do it in between the prison terms. I had to wait till I was, looking at 22 years, but I knew Delancey Street was there. Yeah. I was too big of a coward to walk in on my own and sit on the bench and ask for an interview. I had to be facing that kind of time. But here at the Other Side Academy, about half of our students now are walk-ins. They're walking in off the street. They're taking a seat on the bench. That doesn't mean they don't have a bunch of cases trailing behind them. We just don't incarcerate people like we used to, especially here in Utah, right? You got to commit murder to get 30 days, and then you get good time and you're out early, right? Because it's such a liberal system here. But that's what's created these problems, right?
Come to Seattle. I'll show you a liberal system.
Oh, gosh. People are always saying, well, you can't incarcerate your way out of this problem. You're right, we can't. But if we don't put public safety first, we're missing the mark.
Yeah. Well, we could use that to treat folks. We could use...
My profound goal is that we utilize the criminal justice system and the carceral system in a much more beneficial and meaningful way to allow folks the opportunity to make different decisions in their life. Because 97% or whatever it is, some high 90s percentile of folks that are incarcerated are going to come back out into community and come back out into society. Why would we not want to have those people be productive members of community as opposed to right back to a life of crime, right back to a life of addiction, homelessness, the whole deal?
I want to ask you, the first probably 60 seconds you and I spoke on the phone, what kind of blew my hair back right away is you said, you talked about, being 15, you said, I wasn't a victim. I was an asshole. And then you started to talk about your behavior. Yeah. And I mean, I actually put you on speakerphone because I was like, Eric's going to love this guy. He's got to hear this. But talk to me about that, the victim culture, the victimization.
Yeah. It's the world we live in right now, that it's not our fault that, I got touched when I was 6 and my daddy was mean to me. Life happens to all of us. Life happens. We're going to get T-boned in the intersection with somebody with no car insurance. We're going to come home and our spouse is going to be sleeping with the neighbor because we got home early. Life We're going to get a diagnosis of cancer unexpectedly at 30 years old. Life is going to happen to us. How do you deal with that? I am not a victim to anything. I decided to use drugs the first time I did it, and I decided to use for the next 27 years. I always knew I could ask for help, and I didn't. That is a choice. People think trauma happens, and that's the reason why we use. There's no such thing as a traumatic event where you wake up from it and there's a needle in your arm. Traumatic events happen and they cause us to feel a certain way. Then we get to choose how we deal with it. Do I talk to people? Do I get a therapist? Do I talk it out so I don't act it out? Or I'm going to use to mask it. It is a choice. Nothing makes us use. We get to choose. When we take that away, then it's no longer our fault. And we live in this world now where, my gosh, this happened and this happened and this happened. And that's why when is it trauma and when is it the excuse?
Yeah. Yeah, I talk a lot about that. Yeah, everybody does have trauma. Again, we did learn that in the 90s. There was a lot of evidence. But I talk a lot about post-traumatic growth, that we're kind of missing the point. I did grow up with this idea that every experience can be useful. So the stuff that happens to me and things did, and then the bad choices I make also, all of it can be useful. It depends on what we do with it. Absolutely. And I do think we've completely missed that message. I don't think our kids are growing up understanding that anymore. And I think that we're actually keeping everyone hostage to that moment. I mean, if you want to actually be a victim for life, then keep calling yourself a victim. And you met our friend Jenny Burton, who, it's like no victims. That's her whole deal. But I think there's something very empowering. Like, I've never talked about victimization. I never thought about myself that way ever. I thought about myself as tough and resilient and smart and able to sort of intellectualize human behaviors. And then the other thing I've often observed is that the most kind people, the most compassionate people I know, there is a backstory. That deep kindness, and you do exemplify it. It is forged on that battlefield very often. And I often hear people with incredible backgrounds say, I wouldn't actually change any of it. And that's how I feel about my losses too. I wouldn't change any of it. This is now why I am here and why I am who I am.
I agree, Amy. If you guys go on LinkedIn, you'll see a picture of me and a gentleman yesterday. I do presentations all over the place, almost darn near daily. And I was at a treatment facility. They have me come there every 3 months to talk to their residents. You want to know what they have me come do? Tell them the truth. Come tell them what we're not allowed to tell them because we're bound by the state. They have me come do the dirty work, and I'm happy to do it, right? I come in guns blazing. They're all sitting in that room, victims, bilking mom and dad out of tens of thousands of dollars for their 8th treatment facility, while the same mom and dad are raising their kids that they're incapable of raising because they gave them away, because they traded them for sex and dope, right? Opposites, whatever, you know what I mean? Because you get it. All in there being a victim. I literally sat there yesterday, did the presentation, and this good-looking dude, beard, big guy goes, well, what about my trauma? What about it? I explained to him what happened to me when I was 6. I explained to him what happened to me during my upbringing. I explained the fights and the beatings I've been in prison and by the cops. I love them. That incident happened. If you're still letting it own you today, it's still happening. If you got molested at 11 and you're 44 and you're still landing on that, you're still being molested. We get to choose to let it go or hold on to it. End of conversation.
So, as we near the end of this, what do you want folks to know? If as a society, I mean, with the goal, and I know you're doing God's work, you're doing incredible things, and you're changing the lives of hundreds of folks that are going to be back out as our neighbors and walking amongst us, right? What do you want society to figure out? What do you want us to know so that we can continue to make inroads in not just casting folks away? You're a drug addict, you're a criminal, you have no value, you have no worth to community and to society moving forward. If we ultimately want to change that, what is the summary message that we need folks to understand?
The summary message is this: if we're pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars in resources into this, and the problem's getting worse, damn it, back up and assess what we're doing. What we're doing isn't working. or the problem wouldn't be getting worse, right? It would not be getting worse. And it is getting worse because we're so busy making excuses for people and justifications and rationalizing away our right to choose. We are choosing our lifestyle just like I did. I chose my lifestyle. I broke my life. I need to fix my life. We've got thousands and thousands of drug addicts in a room being told it's not their fault. They're always going to be sick. And relapse is part of recovery. You just signed my death warrant. The hell it is.
Yeah.
If I relapse today, it's not part of recovery. It's because I chose to. Put the onus on me to make better decisions. Hold drug addicts accountable. Stop making excuses for them. Give them a long time to make the changes they need to make, not the 30, 60, 90-day model that fails 95% of the time. Long-term, real life with truth and accountability. Tell people the truth.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it very
Appreciate
much.
you
Best way
so
I can
much.
articulate it.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. And we got to figure out a way to get Dave into the Bombardened name because I think they've been Durochered.
Yeah, I know.
They've been Durochered on Bombardened.
Yeah.
That's what's happened here.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Yeah.
I haven't known you guys long, but I love you both collectively and individually. You're remarkable people. Both of you and your outlook and your willingness to want to help, that pulls on my heartstrings and that connects me to you because we're all in this together. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Individually, Amy, you're good. Eric, you're good. I'm good. But together we are gooder.
Yep.
We've got to join forces.
Yep.
We've got to share these ideas. We've got to start talking about what isn't working and what is and move the needle because people are dying every day because we're not addressing it right anymore.
We're going to do everything we can to help you, my friend. And you're doing great work. Keep it up.
The Bombardened podcast is a Barden Squared production. Executive producers are Eric Barden and Amy Barden, and video and audio production of the Bombardened podcast is by Thread Theory Creative.